Hello and welcome.
Hiya. Don't mind me. I'm breaking things. Oh, I am actually literally breaking things.
Uh-oh, don't break things.
There we go.
So, I know we'll have people joining us in a bit. Hello and welcome to everyone who can join us. Almost said that wrong. Who can join us for
English is hard.
Yeah. Speaking of double standards and tropes,
Oh,
and as always, thank you to Team Rewatch. And a big hello and welcome to Ven, who will be joining me for today's conversation.
Have we got the questions left over from last time as well?
I've got them somewhere, but my room is a mess, so I have no idea where they even are.
You've had an organizing day, to be fair.
We're also going to see and keep this to 2 hours because you need to get some sleep before you head in.
Sleep is for the dead.
Okay. So first of all, because double standards is fairly easy. People know what that means, as in it's okay for one group to say it, but not another group. But trope is a bizarre word. Hey, Aaron.
Hey, Aaron, you all right? Aaron. I'm saying Aaron. Jesus.
So,
I can't read.
Trope is one that always messes me up. I'm used to setting or character or theme.
Yeah.
But everyone I hear on BookTube is talking about trope.
Okay, so this is why I have notes, because I actually went and looked up meanings of things, just so it was clear. So, hope you're doing well, Erin, as well. Hello. Now I've said your name right and not called you Aaron. So, the dictionary definition of trope is a significant or recurrent theme. So, an example would be something like the hero's journey, a rags to riches story, where the overarching story or plot fits a well-worn sort of set of story beats. So if you were to use Lord of the Rings as an example,
right?
Lord of the Rings hits the quest trope, where you have a group of people going off on a quest to do something else, and then it also has the trope of voyage and return, because at the end of it, some of them return home to see how much they have changed in the world outside of since they left. So, and actually, Lord of the Rings is really good for identifying some of these things.
I'm just making notes here because.
So there's, and you sometimes get a bit of confusion with tropes and with archetypes, which
exactly.
So, which I talk about archetypes quite a lot because I play D&D a lot. I play certain archetypes of characters, and there's a couple of different. You can get archetypical stories, which again are generally is another term for trope. You'll have a follow over there, but whereas trope will describe the general arc of a story, it doesn't explain the minutiae, if that makes sense. So it's more in romance, you have the trope is lovers to or rivals to lovers. And it's basically it's a basic framework that is reused quite often and is effective at a storytelling device, framing, I suppose is the best way of wording it. And you could have multiple tropes sat within one book as well. It doesn't have to sit around one. Like, for example, Lord of the Rings has the journey and the hero's journey.
Right.
The quest, the voyage and return, and also has the overcoming the monster trope as well, because you have the obstacle to overcome. So it hits multiple tropes because it's over 3 books. And if you actually break it into the 3 books, they kind of focus a little bit more on individual bits rather than the overarching. So, like, the Return to Monster really is the last book, that overcoming the monster. Sorry, There's a little bit in books 1 and 2, but really that's the trope for the last book, finally overcoming that thing. And all books, well, no, that's unfair. Almost all books will have some trope work or story archetype built into it. It's very, very unusual to get a truly original story at this point, because how long have we been telling stories as a species?
Yeah.
So, hey Sue.
Hey Sue. So Aaron was saying, I suppose thinking about Lord of the Rings did it first early, because it was repeated, it becomes a trope.
I mean, partially true, but then again, a number of those sort of story beats are in older tales. So, like the overcoming the monster. So you could go back to Beowulf, for example.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. And so a lot of these actually have a lot of grounding in much older literature than we're used to, but sometimes they become popularized by a certain book. Lord of the Rings, again, a great example, because you can't discuss a fantasy novel anymore without looking at the influence that Lord of the Rings and Tolkien in general had, even if they're deliberately doing the opposite of what Tolkien did. Yeah. Quite often it's because they want to not do what Tolkien did. So it has an effect by absence, so to speak. So
well, and look at with us just reading Wheel of Time for the second time for the two of us.
Yeah.
For others, it's the first read, but for us going through it the second time, how many things we've picked up from Lord of the Rings, which I didn't catch before. Hey, Jenny.
Hey, Jenny. Especially book 1 as well.
Yeah.
Like because I've always been, well, not always, but for a long time, and I love Wheel of Time, and I read it, most of it before I read Lord of the Rings as well. I will quite often describe Wheel of Time in general as Lord of the Rings extended in a lot of ways, because it hits a lot of the same beats, just really spread out.
Yeah.
But book 1 really does feel like Lord of the Rings condensed. So it's but they become tropes for a reason, because they're popular.
Well, they move the story along, right? And when you're saying, so you think of all the ancient or the old mythologies, whether it's Celtic or Norse, that's where a lot of, archetype is another word that messes me up. And I don't know why. I've read the meaning and all the rest of it, and my brain will not compute what the hell an archetype is. So, even though I know it's hero's journey and maiden and mother and all of that stuff.
There's a few different meanings to archetype, which doesn't help, because you can have the archetypical story, which I would argue is the story trope anyway. Personally, there's very little difference between the two. But an archetype, again, it's a reoccurring universal pattern that represents behaviors. So my argument will always be that an archetype represents a certain set of behaviors or instincts that someone has. So there's, depending on where you look, Carl Jung, the psychiatrist, was he a psychiatrist? I don't know. Famous person anyway in psychology.
Freud?
Hey, Margaret. No, it was Carl Jung.
Oh, Jung.
Yeah,
Carl Jung, the other one.
He created a set of archetypes and sort of made to label people, basically, because it's almost like a stereotype, but not quite. Just so you can easily give that story sort of an emotional grounding, so to speak, because everybody knows, generally speaking, what a hero looks like. Everyone knows what the mentor figure looks like. Again, if you go into Wheel of Time, Gandalf is clearly a mentor figure, just like Moraine is in Wheel of Time.
Yeah, so Lord of the Rings with Gandalf.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How is Ven awake? Not caffeine, interestingly enough. I'm on water today. But then you also
did have your caffeine earlier.
I did have caffeine, a lot of caffeine earlier. But then you have like your everyman, because you need, nearly every story will have the normal guy that's along for the ride.
Yeah.
So Sam for example, Samwise Gamgee in Lord of the Rings, is the perfect example of this. Like just everyday person who's just there to ground the story so you can connect easier. And that's the whole idea of these archetypes. They give you like a vague outline that you can immediately relate to, which then gives you the emotional investment in the story. And then if you really, really dig into it, because if you go further from that, each of those like base archetypes is actually breakdowns of more. So I think there's 77 archetypes in general, if you really spread it out. But that
it depends, because you've got Carl Jung, who had his basic group. Then you've got Carolyn Myss and a bunch of others who have written books about them. And I think as each person grabs onto that, then they break it down more and more so that it's just wild.
To be honest, the Jung ones are actually probably the most useful to use because they're so broad in their thing, because it is very much everyone knows what a villain looks like. Not so much anymore, because I was going to say anti-hero. That's the wrong term.
But I know what you mean.
Yeah, complicated villain is sort of replacing that a little bit. Or sorry, not complicated, sympathetic villain, I should say. A villain who has is going down the wrong road, but for the right reasons, so to speak. Thanos is kind of a good example of that if you ignore the plot holes, where he could have just, clicked his fingers and just made everything abundant. But again, you could see the logic. We have all these issues. Morally grey's been corrupted. Yeah. I use the term morally grey when I probably shouldn't. Because I like what I would class as morally grey characters, which is do the bad things to get the good result. Ends justify the means is kind of sometimes the way.
Yeah. We'll catch up here. So Aaron's saying, would assume Tolkien read Beowulf.
I think he did.
And, Jenny's saying he wrote a Beowulf translation, but she hasn't read it. Hooray, that post meant 3 p.m. so I can be here for the beginning for a bit. So welcome, Margaret. Glad you could make it.
Thanks for that thing you sent me as well earlier, Margaret.
Saying he's a Swiss psychiatrist and psychotherapist. Yes. And he started with Freud, Sigmund, and then they had a parting of the ways. Carl he comes up in pretty much everything nonfiction I read, whether it's about archetypes or ancient civilizations or whatever. He was big on dreams and dream symbology and so many things. We've seen the How Are You Awake? Water rations will do you good. Pre-game caffeine.
It's definitely water and not vodka.
Do you have a channel, Aaron? Morally Grey, co-opted. A villain with redeeming features, here's one. And again, eye of beholder type of thing, or which side of the fence you're on. Vlad Tepes, perfect example. Most of you know him as Count Dracula, the fictional individual. But the prince in, I know it's in the 1400s. To many people, he's known as Vlad the Impaler. He's known as a villain for the things that he did. And to other people, he is the hero. Yeah, I saw Count Chocula. But it depends on which side you're on, because to the people in Romania, he saved the Ottoman Empire from coming to invade them, or he stopped them from invading. So there's that hero part. But how he did it becomes questionable. But the more that I have been diving into his backstory and what's come forward, part of that is propaganda.
Yep.
Because much of what has survived about Vlad is not in Romania. It was written by other people outside of the country who had every reason to do him dirty. So whether the one most famous picture is him eating while all these people are on stakes all over the place. And again, it's so long ago that how are you going to prove or disprove that?
Well, there's definitely, it's like the old saying, isn't it? History is written by the victors.
Well,
and also, if one place keeps its records and another place doesn't, it's a bit difficult to source from multiple places and fact check.
yeah.
So in theory, that's the beauty of the modern age. In theory, in practice, it's impossible to find the truth anymore. So
That's it. We've kind of gone to the other side, and Margaret's right. Biography written by enemies. Yep. Indeed classic. And I've actually come across some stuff about Catherine Bathroy. And same deal. And she was actually, I think she was a contemporary of Vlad. She was in Hungary. He was in Romania, although it was the Hungarians who put him on the throne each time after killing his dad and brother. Whoopsie doodle. Guy had issues, but yeah, even with Catherine now, there's stuff coming out. Whether was she really bathing and in blood, and did she kill all these people, or is it that she was just a strong, powerful woman in a time where you didn't want women strong and powerful? It's so hard to figure out. I'm just trying to figure out here. We have something about a kayaking picture. What have I missed? Oh, there we
go. It's Erin's.
Erin's. Yeah.
Yep. While you're just catching up with that, I have a Vlad book, but it's not going to be what you expect. Just give me a second. It's on the other side of the room.
I can only imagine what this may be on your shelves. Why it's so smart. Deleted all reference to women diversity and gay on government websites. Yeah, it's it is very fascinating research. And I've been interested in Vlad for a long time. My family comes from Hungary, and I just find him an interesting character. Aside from the vampire part, it's like, why was this a person Bram Stoker decided to make a story about? And the fascinating thing with that story is there's actually some accurate historical facts in there. Like Vlad was a warrior.
That's quite often stuff that makes a story work better as well, when you've got that little base in sort of some real life events as well. But the only book that I've not read Dracula. I've read Camilla, but not Dracula. But the only Vlad Dracula book I have is this.
Oh yeah, I remember. That was so cute.
One of my kiddie books, which I hadn't realized till I started looking through it, but it's actually got like actual artist work in it as well. And I believe the audiobook is narrated by Anthony Daniels or C-3PO.
Vlad stays close to me. It was like just an arm's reach away. And that's cool about the narration and lovely memories with your Vlad book. Yeah. Now, and it's funny because I sent a message to Margaret earlier because we were chatting about why are there two prices on books. She had left a comment on one of my videos. And I'm like, no, I remember when I was buying books, there was only one price, but I didn't know when that had changed. My Dracula book may not be older than Since You've Been Breathing, but it is older than Kat and Jenny and Noah. Because this is my copy from when I was a teen. And it was all of $1.95. just one price. So today I decided to Google because I'm like, when did these prices change? And it was the 1990s. And it had to do with books being made in America and the cost and the different dollar and all of that. And yet here we are in 2025 when books are coming from all over the world, not just the ones printed in the United States, but there's two different prices in Canada and the US, like Sarah J. Maas.
That's it. So a lot of my books have two prices on.
Really?
Going back years. Yeah, I was just double checking. So like my Pratchett books, these ones behind me.
Yeah.
They have UK and Canadian prices on them. And I think if I was to dig through most of my books, like some of them haven't got prices on at all. That's probably
now. Which one's more expensive then?
Canada, I think.
See,
so Canada's $7.99 and the UK was $5.99. Now, nowadays,
that's fairly close. And it's the other thing I've noticed as I've been looking at my books. Some are just a couple of dollars. Mass is, I think, $19 US, $25 Canadian.
What's that for? Paperback?
Well, yeah.
Oh, you mean the recommended price? So, hang on, tell me those prices again.
US $19
for paperback, right?
For paperback.
This paperback.
It's paperback.
Okay.
Mine's reddish. And $25 Canadian.
So what?
I think we have the same paperback.
Similar, 420 pages ish for the actual story.
I'm just flipping to the nope, because there's the acknowledgement. 416 pages for the story.
Yeah, so about
you must have got more Boom Chicka Wawa in your version.
Probably not. Probably got more empty pages. So
here's the print size on mine.
Yeah, I think mine's quite similar, to be fair. In fact, no, shall I, in case Noah comes to rewatch, let's show that page, which is about highlighting him. I have never, ever annotated in a book before, but my favorite hatred has driven me to murder books.
You've never annotated in a book before?
No, never.
Woo, welcome to the dark side.
Yeah. So don't forget, I don't make notes as a rule of thumb because it takes out my reading flow.
So, it's because you can't read them, then.
Maybe. Well, yeah, actually. So the UK price is £8.99 for this.
Seriously.
And I did not pay £8 for this. Brand new, I got this for £4.75. Brand new.
WTF?
So it's like I picked up books 3.5 and whatever the last one is. I've read ACOTAR. I hate ACOTAR with a passion.
Hang on. What are we ruining? You're ruining the plan. Arbitrage depends on people in different markets not talking.
Yeah, it does. But like the other two Sarah J. Maas books I got were £2 for £9 in a supermarket. So £4
together or £9 each.
No, £2 for £9. So it's £4.50 each. That's why I ended up with so many books the other day because I went in. And like the other day, I also got Quicksilver, which is this horrific thing. And it's not a small book.
Cover. Let's see the cover.
Yeah. So it's a pretty cover. It's a romantasy. I need to say this, but that teardrop pisses me off because it's shiny. And it's the only shiny thing on his face. But like this was a tenner for the hardback. Brand new.
For the hardback.
Yeah. It's meant to be 20 quid. I wouldn't pay 20 quid for a hardback. Same with
holy jump.
Same with When the Moon Hatched, which is like 650 pages. I paid £11. I think I paid £12.50 for Onyx Storm when it came out. Because there is a massive markdown on, but especially not on indie books. Interestingly, indie books retail at about £11 to £15 for a paperback normally, a little bit more for a hardback.
Well, it just turns out, since we're talking about books and I finally got my master list done, I think I got all of them added. This is what's wrong when you go crazy shopping and then you put your books everywhere. But I just found out Six of Crows is also from 2015, the same as the Keening and Akatar.
Yeah.
And yet I've seen a ton of people suddenly talking about Six of Crows. Hey, Kat.
So it's worth mentioning, actually, because I know. Sorry, Margaret's just mentioned about the book. So here in the UK, they are generally not different. I'll give you an idea. This is actually it's actually foiled on the actual hardback itself.
Nice.
So I know if you go to like the Works, which is like a budget bookshop inverted commas, that one has we'll get ones that are maybe a little bit, have the print slightly skewed. Nothing that I've ever noticed, but they'll get like loads of. It tends to be TikTok books, which is why when I end up buying loads of tripe, it's normally from there because again, like you could buy the entire Akatar series at one point from there for 20 quid.
Seriously?
Yeah. And I mean, even like when I went in Waterstones the other day, the special editions, the new black covers are a tenner. And that's in Waterstones, which is the expensive option, really, a lot of the time in the UK.
That's wild.
But books are over here. Books are relatively cheap.
Now, see, and we'll catch up on comments, and so hold that thought of relatively cheap. Was going to say trade versus mass market. Yeah, and see. This is why I sit on the floor when I do some of these lives. I've got the Tor mass markets for Wheel of Time. I ended up buying them in sets of 3.
Yes.
Because that was before I knew Amazon and other such things a couple of years ago. Now, some of them are good, but some of them, I think to my students who struggled with reading, that would drive them wild. I had problems distinguishing between one page and the other, but it really does depend on the company, I think.
Well, I've got the really old, well, not really old, but I've got the old Orbit ones because I've had them for a long time. And honestly, it's tiny. And the thing is, these are like among the first books that I read. Like when I was an adult, which is a ridiculous place to start. First off, this and Shannara by what's his name, Terry Brooks, who was recently passed the torch on Shannara on a side point. But because I didn't start with small books, I just went full on into series.
See, and I really haven't read many series other than Lord of the Rings and. I honestly can't think of many others, but okay. Have you? Oh, yes, you already the next book. And it's funny when you sent me that thing earlier, and I'm like, why are you reading Frost and Starlight?
I wanted to be annoyed at Feyre's stupidity from the off, and I actually still am. But we can get into that later on.
We will. Okay, I bet it was less expensive before the popularity kicked in. Yeah, because, I mean, it is going wild again. Supermarket editions are different quality. Well, not necessarily, Margaret. And I just got, who are the, these are Ballantine because I'm doing the Vampire Chronicle read with Kat. Couldn't count on getting them when I wanted them from the library. Plus, I wanted to annotate Lestat. Just bought this. And the pages, this is page 1. And this is not me being rough with the book. It's already frickin' falling apart, and it's just a month old. Like, seriously?
That's poor
Dracula hasn't fallen apart, and I've read it numerous times.
Have I got any books that have fallen apart? I probably have got books that have fallen
apart. I don't now see Dracula is dog-eared.
As it should be.
I don't actually, I don't dog-ear to mark pages. I do it to mark important pages. But no, I have not annotated in my precious Dracula. I would have to find another cheap copy to do that to Dracula.
So the interesting thing about
so cool
UK books is the price drops when they get popular here, because what they do, so what quite often happens, it might be the opposite way around to the way it works in the US, I suspect. I know you're not in the US before you point it out.
I was going to say, don't even.
I suspect Canada may sit somewhere in the middle of this, but quite often, unless it's holidays, if something suddenly gets popular, they'll bulk buy and drop the price, because they can then get the profit margins probably go up, because what they'll do is they'll bulk buy, get a discount for the bulk buy, and then they'll push it out at a lower price point, because they try and compete with Amazon. Because over here you've got Waterstones you've got Amazon, obviously, which is the biggest bookseller in the UK by a country mile. You then have Waterstones, which is Barnes and Noble, basically.
And then the next here in Canada.
Yeah, and then the next biggest one you have is Blackwell's, which used to be an independent company, I believe, and isn't anymore. And they're quite good for getting indie books, interestingly, I've discovered the last couple of days. And there is one in Manchester that I have not been to yet. But like it gets ridiculous. So I picked up this by V.E. Schwab. Not read it yet. Nice chunky hardback. This was £12.50. This was signed. This is actually author signed.
Nice.
As well. And it's like, even like the normal supermarkets, they have books with sprayed edges now. That are just as good quality, especially, again, the TikTok. I think it's not independent in the way that I think of independent. It is a chain. So there is quite a few of them now. It's independent of big business, though.
Okay, so Double Chaos is here.
Yeah.
Sue saying hi. Stabby book.
Stabby.
Saying hi. 10 GBP equals 1854 Canadian. Okay, so close to 19. And that was something I did want to get back to, is your money converted, excuse me, to Canadian versus American, because that's the other difference, right? When you say, now, what's the difference between pound and quid?
They're the same. A pound is a quid. Quid's just slang.
Okay.
Basically.
So money-wise, if you say pound or quid, it's the same type of thing.
Right? It's the same. Hi, Mark.
Definitely not cheap here for special editions. Now you're just showing off. Do we have all right. Normal hardback, 32 for the last one. Yeah, and I think, well, when I was just at Indigo, and it blew me away, one of the tables was literally all sprayed edges books, which I've never seen in Indigo before, ever. Now, granted, I've been a year and a bit since I've been there, but I don't remember ever seeing sprayed edge books there. They had an amazing copy of Dune. It was, I think, an anniversary edition, $60. I'm like, seriously, I still haven't read the paperback. I cannot justify, excuse me, $60 on a book to sit on my shelf that I still, but I mean, it was gorgeous. The edges are amazing, but
I just buy all the books to sit on my shelf.
So Margaret, sort of Shannara, tried to read one of those in school. See, I don't know that series. Oh yeah,
that would be this absolute monstrosity. It's the whole series.
Oh, wow.
1,200 pages. And the thing is, if you get into Shannara, I don't even know where I'm up to on Shannara, because there's prequel series, because it is post-apocalypse, but fantasy setting. A bit like Wheel of Time is actually the way, but this is Earth. So you've got the ruins of ancient cities in there. So there's a series set when the elves came back and the Earth fell and into dispute. And magic is based kind of in science in some cases. So all the magic they use, it's just bits of lost science. So you have these quests that people sometimes go on to get the magic shiny thing, which is a DVD sometimes and stuff like that. But there's a lot of series, and they all interconnect. They did I think it was an MTV TV series of it as well, which was an MTV YA TV series, but it had Thingy Butler in it, who played Elvis a couple of years ago. He was all right.
Wow. Okay, so sometimes you can barely read the parts nearest to the spine. Exactly. Woo, Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
See? Right into our double standards. So many hot guys in the movies. Now, could a guy say that about the girl in the movies without getting in trouble? Hold that thought. We still got to catch up.
Yeah.
So many colors and WTF falling apart. Yes, I agree. That's my vampire Lestat. Gonna make Noah faint from all the gasping.
He probably already has. He's probably asleep.
Yeah, not stuck with that orange idiot. Well, just true, but doesn't mean we're hey Mark, we're not gonna end up getting kicked in the ass because of him. Now, see, I've never heard of Blackwell, so that's interesting. Hey, but not for long. Retracts claws. Claws are so useful when they're out. Didn't know where my voice keeps going. Blackwell's in the UK. Good to know some indies there. Break away from Amazon a bit. And see, Amazon is where I can get Margaret's books and Nicole's books. Take care, Mark. Thanks for popping in.
See you later.
You know, a lot of the authors that I can't find in other stores here, I can at least get on Amazon. V.E. Schwab is class. Now, that's the book you just held up, right?
That one. Yeah, I have been meaning to get to Schwab for quite a while. I have heard amazing things. So, but that's probably not a good place to start. Because I know it's a book one, but it's a book one, I believe, following all linked to another series. So
see, that's like me with Dresden. But so Kat, that's one of those dream shelf books. Exactly. I mean, it was beautiful and shiny, and there were so many pretty books, but the least expensive I found on that table was 6 of Crows, and the rest were all sprayed edges between $30 to $60. And I'm like, no, I want to go crazy shopping, but I'll save that for the thrift store at $5 a book.
6 of Crows was £6 from the works.
How much?
£6. Because again, it was popular because of the Netflix series. That's not its RRP, to be clear. I think it's probably £11.
Yeah, see, I've got the Netflix sticker.
Oh yeah, I also have the Netflix sticker. I hate those stickers.
$16.50 for me, $11.99 for Americans.
That's a bit of a markup. Ow.
But and that's why I said it depends on the book. Sometimes it's a $2 difference. I've seen it up to $8 on a book. It's like cuckoo.
£9 is the RRP for it, which again, it has that.
Yeah, come on. You and I have the same cover.
Yeah, I think yours looks slightly different because it looks like you've got a bit of a red inside to that. So I think mine is actually a mass market one.
An insert.
Yeah, I've not got that. To be fair, that insert's very pretty.
The insert's look, it's a the crow in a cup.
It's like The Alchemist all over again.
So Margaret's telling you which book to start with.
I have a suspicion I've got that on my Kindle, actually. I'm going to look
Darker
up
Shade
now.
of Magic. Gotta step out. Take care, Margaret. Nice you could pop in.
See you later.
Ooh, so funny. Got so many of the same books and copies. Yes, we do. Oh, yeah. And I still have to figure out the one pirate thing. Netflix embossed. How annoying. Yeah, it's no, it's just mine's not embossed. It's just stuck on there. Same as
I've got a few that are like that right now, and it don't like it.
This is the inspiration for the hit television. So that's on there as part of the print as well. And Prime series, like, why do they have to put this on the books or stick it in the back?
I understand why they do it. Why they do it to a point. I don't see why it's not just a sticker you can. Well, I do. It's cost, but not just a sticker you can peel off. But there's a cost element there, I suspect. So
it's still Gur.
It's worse when you get TV covers where the full cover has got like the cast from the TV show on it rather than the actual book covers. I hate that even more. Which I know, although I don't actually have a physical copy, my audiobook of Wheel of Time, my latest one, has the cast on the front because Rosamund Pike is narrating it.
Yeah.
But it's trying to tap into that popular market, I suppose, to an extent, which I get. I don't like it. I like book covers. It's why I spend so much.
Yeah.
So
okay. So, Kat, pirate thing. What are you talking about? So there's this pirate book tag. Mine went up today. Ven's is coming in a week, 2 weeks.
I think it's the 27th. I've recorded it. It's planned. I think it's the 27th. The pirate one goes up. Hang on. Let's have a nosy. Oh, no. Sorry. 20th. The 27th is the Bookish Elements tag, which Kat tagged me in. So.
Yeah, see, I'm behind on tags. But as Ven and I were chatting, it turns out we picked the same book or the same character for one of the prompts. Now, I'm going to have to watch my own video or look at my answers because I jot them down. It isn't Spock because you left a comment about Spock.
No, I would never have Spock as a second in command, number one, because I've seen Dark Mirror Universe Spock, so cannot be trusted. But also, this shows my age and how much of a geek I am, but there's kind of a Spock analogy in the Transformers TV series.
Yeah, and see, I didn't watch Transformers, so
I love Transformers. Oh, she's off.
Bye, Kat.
No, she's off as in she's spamming the chat again. It's like she's got bored with spamming Voxer. Let's get the chat now.
No. See, she said, got to fake work again.
Oh, okay.
And Jenny must have fallen asleep.
Oh, well.
She wasn't supporting her little buddy spamming.
Oh, give it time. But I was saying, in Transformers.
Transformers and Spock.
And it doesn't play the same in the series, it's more in the comics. But there's a character called Shockwave who is the second in command of the bad guys. But he is purely logical. He basically removed his emotions when he was a smaller robot.
Yeah.
And eventually he went, that person's just too unstable to be in charge. I should be, and just tried to kill him. And he is one of the most heinous characters in Transformers in general, if you go across it all, because he's a mad scientist. He experiments on things that he probably shouldn't. Horrific character, one of my favorite characters in the entire show on a side point. But a truly, the sort of villain that that is just a villain that works because they're competent. Because you'll get these villains and they just have these, and it's the mustache twirling idea, which is what Megatron is in Transformers, the evil because power maniacal laughter, where it's just like, well, I want to do all this because of this, and this is how I'm going to get there. And that actually makes him a really threatening character in general. The films did him dirty, though, the recent ones. But
we'll see. And it's interesting, and I mean, we did mention, so we've talked a bit about the tropes and things. And again, I think, was it because of ACOTAR that we started talking about this double standards?
It might have been. I
Like
have.
Sarah and how she behaves compared to if she was a man
It could be. So
and doing that.
I'm aware that when I read, because I read a lot of fantasy, and historically speaking,
Yeah.
fantasy has been very male-led and male-authored
Mm,
as a rule of thumb. And for a long time, it was quite, and in a lot of ways, romance has shifted this actually, which I'm quite pleased about, in that it's opened up the market a lot more, made it a more inclusive market to draw people in that weren't the original target audience.
right.
But I have a bizarre double standard of my own when I read different protagonists, and I'm aware of this bias. I know it's there. I expect better from my female characters than my male characters, which is a
Hmm.
ridiculous thing to say. I caught myself with it on which book was it? It might have been Throne of Glass. Actually, it might have been the other Sarah J. Maas series.
Yeah, I haven't read those. And I'm
So
not going to.
no, well, to be fair, they're YA, so they don't. They when
I
they
don't
get
mind YA,
no
but I'm
when
just not reading any more Sarah
no
Maas.
when they get to the spicy scenes, it fades to black,
Mm.
but which is fine, no issue with that. But there's a few things that the character does in that I think I judge that character more harshly than I would a male character.
So why do you think that is?
Because I think men are stupid and idiots. Basically. No, I genuinely I do actually think that is a little bit of it. I expect a male main character to deal more emotionally and react faster and make the stupid mistake more. And I'm not sure exactly why that is, but it's
So
a
you
bias.
would love, see, it's handy these books
Yeah,
are here. You would love Robert Langdon.
yeah,
Langdon, the guy's a moron.
yeah. And I am bizarrely more forgiving of that in a male lead. And
Really?
it's something I'm aware of. I know it's there, so I
Yeah.
try and pull it back. But and a lot of it comes down to when you look at the stereotype in real life
Mm,
for a stereotypical man and a stereotypical woman, and this is now being broken down, which is great. Generally speaking, men are said to be, and actually are in a lot of cases, more reckless. It's part of the reason we don't live as long. But the argument for a long time is men make better soldiers because they don't think about their own safety. They'll just go whoosh. And
mm,
to be fair, I see this in work when dealing with shoplifters because the other managers who are female that I work with will not confront. Now, there's physical reasons for that as
mm.
well. Whereas I will chase. I'm 42. I've got the fitness of someone who's been bedridden for 10 years. I shouldn't be chasing anybody. I still do. And it's not my stuff as well. I'm not meant to.
Yeah.
But there's that adrenaline rush. There's that adrenaline junkie rush, which I think is certainly portrayed as being more of a male thing than a female thing.
Well,
And also women tend to be portrayed and described as being more thoughtful, more compassionate, and less reactive. The step back. Now, this isn't
mm,
always true. I have had plenty of arguments with plenty of people where I've been the reasonable one, or I think I have anyway, probably wasn't, but there we go. And those sort of stereotypes and the stereotype varies by country as well,
yeah.
because obviously you have cultural differences that play in.
Well, and
But
that's another part, right?
yeah,
Is, you know, you have to factor in the country, then you factor in the family and how the individuals are raised and what's acceptable,
yeah,
partly because, and I used to tell my teachers this all the time. I went to a like it was a small school. I spent a lot of time indoors at recess writing lines. Thus my immaculate handwriting, because back then you either did it on paper or the chalkboard. And I would tell them, it was crap because I only ended up with detention because I beat the snot out of the boys. If it had been the other way around, or if it was just two boys, which it was, they didn't end up getting pulled off the yard. It's like, what the hell?
Yeah, well, that's the other thing as well, is
Double
that
standard.
in terms of educate, at least here in the UK, so again, so a bit of a microcosm, girls outperform boys in education. So then you have the logic that, generally speaking, someone who has a better education is going to be less reactive because they'll think it through more. So there's a level of reinforcement there. So there's the initial, well, men are just more hot-headed and more reactive, to also men tend to be actually dumber according to educational metrics, so are more likely to do the stupid thing. So when a female main character does a stupid thing, it kind of sits worse with me. And the thing is, it always sits worse with me in very specific circumstances. So if I was to use Violet from Fourth Wing as an example, a character we don't necessarily totally agree on at times. So
not at all.
she has a couple of stereotypes attached to her, which I think get overlooked. So she was trained to be a scribe, which means she's book smart, not street smart.
Exactly.
And in my head, that explains why she misses so much of the social cues that are going on, where she should pick up on certain things earlier on. But we are portrayed for her being hardworking, instinctive, and generally speaking, relatively smart in the situations that she needs to be relatively smart in, which tend not to be the plot relevant ones, which is really helpful. And when she fails, it's not necessarily because of a lack of something on her part, it's because of an unseen that she couldn't account for. So, for example, because of her disability, a medical condition, she has to cheat to win the thing. So she's using the poison. Well, one of those times that goes wrong because she misjudged the dose because it was an imperfect thing to do. That doesn't bother me because it makes sense. It's when you have the not plot armor, because it's the reverse. You need the plot to do something, so you need the character to do something stupid that doesn't fit in their character. And I find the inconsistency works less well for me with a female main character than a male one. The example of this I will always give is from a Sarah J. Maas book. It's from Crowd of Madness, which is book 2 of the Throne of Glass series. And the main character, who's called Selena Sadothian, is an assassin. We're told in book 1 how amazing an assassin she is. She's currently in jail. But she's taken out of jail for whatever reason and entered into royal tournament to win contract to be the king's assassin, basically. The king was the one that put her in jail. So there's a few errors with this ideal straight away. But she wins. There's a few things in book 1 where it's like, well, that doesn't make sense, but it's fine. But she begins to get into a semi-romantic relationship with the captain of the guard who is training her. The captain of the King's Guard, okay? This is important. And this King's Guard, she, even in her internal monologue, says how loyal he is to the king. Important fact, this. And it's reinforced throughout the story. And what she's doing, she's given assassination jobs. So she goes off to assassinate people. Except she isn't killing them. She's letting them go free and sort of faking the death, basically. But then she goes for a romantic meal with this King's Guard about halfway through the books and tells him. This is a character that is explained to be incredibly competent, very smart, and at multiple things this is shown until the plot needs her to fail. And I could see Rand doing that in Wheel of Time, falling into that trap of not being as aware of what's going on, no matter how competent he's portrayed to be. I can't see this other character doing it. And part of that is internal bias on my part, which I'm aware of. Part of it is bad writing. And I do wonder if part of it is I struggle with bad writing of female protagonists more than male ones. Probably because I've read a lot more male ones, to be fair. So I've kind of glossed it a little bit.
Well, and there are so many points. We'll get to Aaron's comments Was going to say it was because of stereotypes. There's always some basis in reality. And that's an excellent point, too. I mean, that's where some of those stereotypes come from.
If not current reality, certainly historical fact as well, because some of the stereotypes are now outdated because culture's moved on, but the stereotype has stuck for whatever reason. So,
yeah. And I mean, again, there's that as well there's changes, there's developments. The challenge is when a stereotype is given to everybody in that group and it's inaccurate.
Yeah.
That's the problem with using one brush for everybody. Probably I'll think we're the reasonable one, and
I am
very
always
true.
reasonable, except when I'm not.
But
I am incredibly unreasonable at times, so I know this.
Well, I think, we all have our days in that. And yeah, as far as characters, see, I don't know. It's funny. Violet, I know exactly what bothers me. And it isn't the wanting to climb Xaden through all of that book, although that didn't help her cause. What bugs me with Violet is someone living with chronic pain and various physical conditions and reading this individual who has conditions and yet is somehow a dragon rider.
I mean, she shouldn't be walking the next day a lot of the time either, should she? Let's be honest. From either of the physical exertions she goes through within the books.
I mean, for what they say she has and everything she has to wrap up, no way is that happening for someone in that condition.
No.
I mean, Jesus, I only did 3 hours of gardening the other day, and I could barely move all of Monday night.
And the thing is, that's...
Sunday night, pardon me. I was not too bad last night, but the first night was like, oh my God, what did I just do?
Yeah, and the thing is, it's great having that representation in there because you want this character that has this physical disability, this physical challenge. You want the representation there. Completely agree with that. You need to think that representation through properly. So what Yaros has not done is provided a proper explanation for how she can fall. And she does suffer more than other riders do, but not to the extent that she should. So she should be far worse than she is. And there are ways you can literally hand wave that away with a couple of little things, like every night she takes this special potion that's specially brewed that reduces thing, or the magical link with Tern gives her something and reinforces and adds to her fortune. There are really easy ways that you could just go, meh. And you know what? Does it make sense? Probably not, really, if you stop and think, but it's something there. Just having the extra hand wraps doesn't cut it. Whereas if I go to 16 Souls or 12 Bones by Rosie Talbot, who's a UK author. So they have the main character is they've lost the legs. I can't think what the term is off the top of my head. They lost the legs to meningitis. And the way that impacts the character is shown in World. So you have a moment where there's a chase scene in a really narrow hallway, and this person's there with the prosthetic legs, which are rubbing and really suffering, and they've mentioned the cream that they need to sort of deal with rubs, and the fact that most of the time they'll use a wheelchair, but this is in York where it's old buildings, narrow walkways, not always thing. And it plays into the character and it shows how the character is affected day to day with that.
Right.
And it's about layering the character there, which a lot of writers don't do a good job of. They'll stick to the archetype and a few bits that are plot relevant, but then not build backwards into the character properly. Violet works better for me than Feyre does so far, for a couple of different reasons. But I hate Feyre. And just
wait till you read the rest of the books.
Well, just going through book one, because I know we had a conversation about the initial thing about her killing because she was hungry. And my argument was she killed because she's an idiot. And I think either view can be taken as right. I think mine's right because it's the one that I want to believe.
No.
But and it's fine if people disagree. Conversation's good. But in the first chapter, I've highlighted quite a bit, and it's she's looking at this thing. And if she doesn't think it's Fae, why does she use the specific Fae arrow? Because she only has one of them, and they're really expensive. And she says multiple times, bigger than should be, Dad. And references probably a Fae, probably a Fae, probably a Fae. And yes, she's hungry. I do understand that. And
well,
that was a driving
survival, because plain wolf or Fae wolf, it's going to kill her if she doesn't kill it. But I will reread that section, and I'm trying to find, and then we can chat more about that. But yeah, I think with Feyre, and I mean, speaking of, well, double standards and all of that stuff, I think what really got me through ACOTAR wasn't just, the scenes and all of that, but suddenly you have all these perfect, gorgeous, doesn't matter who it is, Fae.
Yes.
What's wrong with being an average Jack or Jill Fae?
So, if you dive into Fae lore, generally
you know more about that than I do.
And this is why ACOTAR doesn't work for me. So I always think of the Fae like a cat.
Yeah.
Easiest way I could think of it. Beautiful to look at. Absolutely deadly. If they're as big as you, they will rip your face off. Hello, Darkstar.
Hey, Darkstar.
We're talking about ACOTAR for a change. But my logic of Fae is they are long-lived. So they're divorced from their emotions a bit more. They're far more in the moment. They don't have the consequences. And it's great having these. There's JJ as well.
She is.
We're not spoiling it. Don't worry. We're just having our normal discussion on whether Faye was an idiot or not, which the answer is yes.
Well, and we're also talking double standards, where it really does come up.
Yeah.
I mean, sort of in this book, and even if you get into Robert Langdon, who is supposed to be Harvard educated, brilliant, and does some of the dumbest shite ever.
But again, you have the stereotype of book smart, not street smart, playing in a little bit there, which is, I guess, kind of one of the most overused sort of character cheats, I suppose you'd call it. Again, you could potentially call it a character trope as well, because it's a reused thing that plays in quite often. But it's frustrating. And the issue I have with ACOTAR is, fine, make these beautiful elf people. Elves are meant, depending on where you pull from the mythology, are meant to be these almost flawless skinned, lithe, beautiful, dexterous. They almost, watching them move is meant to be like watching someone dance beautifully. They're meant to be all grace and elegance and threat at the same time. And I just get these are just pretty people. These are just really good-looking people that have just happened to live a long time, but they're still human, because they are portrayed as, I mean, I don't want to call them too human because I don't like the relationships from what I've read in book one.
See, book one did not bother me as much as the other books. And when I can't believe I am reading this again.
I mean, I'll be honest, I am skimming book one. I'm literally going through book one to skim. I'm skimming and note taking and annotating. That's all. I'm not actually reading the damn thing because I don't want to, basically. But I want my notes in order.
Yeah. Well, since we're not going to be doing the group read, and if someone wants to join, yes, Ven and Noah are going to torture me again, and I'm rereading this frickin' series after I said I wouldn't.
This was never my idea. Like,
you know what? Forget it. If you keep blaming me for buying books, you're gonna get blamed for ACOTAR.
That's fair.
Just deal with it.
That's fair.
But so we've got Farah, who, okay, she's like the Hunger Games Katniss doing the hunting. That's where everything kicks off. Now, the first book, well, other than Farah, and see here, okay, here's the double standard for me. Actually, Dark Star, have you finished ACOTAR yet? Because I don't want to say
I
too
don't
much.
think she's started it yet.
Okay. So I'll try not to spoil it. Let's just say Farah likes her guys. And that's very descriptive.
Yep.
However, if that was reversed, so we don't have to. No, I'm reading ACOTAR because this started as a joke to bug Ven about Farah, and then suddenly I read the whole damn series, and Ven and Noah haven't even finished it yet. Okay,
I've only read book 1.
Yeah, love TikTok. There's nothing to spoil. There is a little hope.
Yes, if you're anywhere near book, you cannot escape anything to do with ACOTAR. Even now, it's still all over. I don't know why, because it's not that.
Okay, but here's the thing, and I don't have TikTok, but here's the thing. So we have Farah, who's got her boy toy in town. Then she has Tamlin and the big woo-woo, and then we won't say anything else about the other books. But if that had been Tamlin with a woman in town,
yep,
and then some fae who kidnapped him, and all lovey-dovey, what would people say about Tamlin?
So if you reverse the roles, it becomes problematic. And I'll be honest, I think it's problematic to begin with. And there is for me personally, so I'm so happy that people are reading books. Like, let's get that out of the way. Everyone should read. I don't want people, if people enjoy reading this, great.
Yeah.
The problem I have is the relationships that are portrayed in these books, because they're almost aspirational. And that is a problem because they're not aspirational, they're abusive. In a lot of ways. They're toxic, they are full of coercion and gaslighting. And you see this in a lot of romance as well now. Because dark romance is incredibly popular. By God, is it problematic? And I will find out exactly how problematic it is in September. But because I know what I'm reading for that, yeah, I'd rather read The Door Smut, to be honest. Like, genuinely, that was less of a problem.
And I don't read that stuff because I just don't have an interest. To me, it takes away from the story. But if other people enjoy it, I'm glad Sarah J. Maas has written this stuff for people to enjoy and get into. What concerns me is when people think that's an okay relationship or that's a healthy relationship.
Well, the other thing is,
same as Hollywood, to be fair, in the movies, people can't distinguish between love
and lust
and obsession. Well, or lust. And that's, I don't know, to me, that's part of why there's so many difficulty with relationships and people just walk away from them. And I would never suggest stay with somebody who's abusive or your life is in danger or anything like that. But I don't think a lot of these breakups are because of that. There are some people who get in their head, oh, it's supposed to be roses and sunshine all the time. And that's not how relationships work in the real world.
So I have a slightly different take.
Well, of course you do.
Not a huge, but this is because I am divorced. So, but I did a little bit of research into this as well. The really interesting thing is that the general agreement is that as we get older, we change, we grow, we develop.
Yep.
And it is perfectly natural for, even if people are in relationships, for them to grow in separate ways. That doesn't necessarily mean anything's wrong, but we now live longer.
Yeah.
So 50 years ago, people were dead at 45. A lot of people get divorced mid 40s, and that's normally when lives quite often really do diverge. So I think part of the staying together is, and there's another reason for this as well, actually, which is to do with media, interestingly enough, is that we now live longer, and that sort of life path divergence hits people more now than it ever has. I think that plays into it a little bit. I think there is a little bit of social media and the grass is greener. Dark Star makes an amazing point. People don't know how to have a relationship. And that also plays into the double standards thing in a way as well, which I'll get to. But the other thing is, so up until like the millennials, like my generation, the idea of love and relationships was Disneyfied, if that makes sense. Every time you saw relationships on screen, it was the Disney relationship.
Yeah. The perfect family, the perfect number of kids.
And obviously we've now moved away from that, and the world has changed a little bit, and we're seeing it in a little bit, but you could follow the sort of trajectory. It's like, this is what marriage and love looks like. And it explains why if you have such a romanticized view of something, if it doesn't live up to that expectation, you are not going to be happy, because it's an expectation management thing. The other thing is, we don't, I say we as if it's everybody, many people don't communicate well. Now, this is especially historically true of men. Because of upbringing. Toxic masculinity is a thing. I'll quite happily talk about this. And one thing that many people, myself included, growing up, was do not show emotion, do not show weakness.
Yeah.
And I've spoken about mental health on here before. When about a year ago, when I was having a really tough time, I was told to just deal with it. I don't see what your problem is. Just go and work more.
Oh, Lord.
That was by my dad.
Well, and again, generational, right?
A generational thing. And we're in a really interesting and weird space right now, because quite rightly, there is a feminist movement. Quite rightly. People should be, not just that movement, but equal rights in general. We'll try and ignore the stupid government in the US for a minute. But as a rule of thumb, we have come a long way in the last 30 years. Generally speaking, in terms of inclusivity, acceptance, understanding, and communication. Those things have, generally speaking, not entirely, but generally speaking, across much of the world, got better. The problem you have is, as the communication has got better, the expectations have changed, but the communication of those expectations sometimes haven't. So you have this interesting thing right now around female empowerment, which is great. Love it.
Provided they don't abuse it, but I'll get on to that when...
So I have a specific example of something that, as a man, confuses and pisses me off. Should I hold a door open for you? Now, I think I should, just out of politeness, right? But I have seen people go, I don't need you to hold the door open for me. And then other people will go, oh, it's because the old-fashioned view is polite, chivalrous. That is, the good thing to do. Now, I also follow the logic that if you don't hold the door open for me, I don't say thank you, then I'll slam it in your head. I don't care who you are, but that's just my logic. But it's an interesting thing now where there's a weird conflux from a male point of view, because you can kind of see the trajectory for a little bit more clearly for where women are heading in a good way, in terms of evolving social roles and stuff like that. I'm trying to pick my words carefully because I know what I mean. I can miscommunicate this really easily. It's really easy to see what the goal for women is. It's equality. right? Equal opportunity, treated equally. The
One
drawback
would
is,
hope.
one would hope, the drawback is that number one is something I've spoken about before. There is a danger of making two groups equal by tearing the other down.
Mm-hmm.
Because what happens then is that creates resentment in the group that's torn down. Now, obviously, there's exceptions to this. Taking the whip away from people so they couldn't whip slaves is universally a good thing. Okay, universally a good thing. But as a rule of thumb, if to elevate one group you tear down another, that doesn't work.
No.
What you've got to do is raise everybody up to that level, and we're not seeing that. And I've seen two really interesting videos in the last week. One was to do with Black Widow in the Marvel movies. Now,
okay.
I found it really interesting that they spoke about Black Widow and not Thor in this thing, because Black Widow is a sexualized character who then had actual characteristics bolted on later on to round the character out. Completely right. Do I have an issue with a film having a sexualized character? Not really. For either side as well. Thor was very similar to that, where the characterization was bolted on later on. Now, you had the relationship with Loki, that's fine, that fleshed out a little bit more. But the outfits were designed to sexualize. And in fact, in the last Thor movie, there is a moment where Zeus clicks his fingers and Thor's clothes all fly off. And he's naked in the middle of a coliseum. And you've got the female characters going, no, don't put them back on just yet. It's fine. We'll just sit and watch. If that happened to Jane Foster's version of Thor, what would that reaction be? If it's not exactly the same reaction, why? And it then fetches me back to the Diet Coke argument, which I know I've mentioned to you before. For years and years and years and years, Diet Coke adverts were aimed, in the UK at least, at women. I always had a shirtless man cleaning a window.
That's how this all came up. We got to talk. Yeah.
And it's one that has always irritated, because I have no issue with using stuff like this to sell products to a certain demographic. I absolutely genuinely don't care. Yeah. It's like a lot of other things. If people are happy in doing what they're doing, go at you. Don't care. Blades in the office. And it frustrates me. But again, if it was trying to sell, I don't know, Monster Energy or something at a similar sort of situation, there'd be an outcry.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to me that the standard isn't held the same. And it should be. Because that's what equality is. Equality works both ways. Or every way, because obviously you've got... not getting into everything else.
So Darkstar is saying with the holding the door, it's polite. Hold the door if someone's coming up. And I do the same.
In fact, I have a better example actually than the holding the door open. Opening the car door. So, or pulling the chair out at a table when you go to a restaurant.
Yeah.
Right? So when I go to the restaurant, with a friend of mine, if it's like a female friend, I will pull their chair out. I'll let them go through the door first. These are things that are ingrained into me, but then you'll get the pushback of, we want a man that treats us like this. But also, we're a strong, independent woman. And they don't mesh at all.
Well, that's it. And it depends on the woman. But so Aaron's saying used to hold the door for teachers. Open the door for anyone if I get to it first. Thank anyone who opens it for me. And same. And it's funny, you just mentioned with the car doors. My husband always gets the car door for me and always has. And I mean, holding doors will do it. But when you're saying about feminists, and I'll be honest, and being a woman, I have a problem with them because it's like some other groups. They want to be equal, not all of them. So again, here's what I've seen. Sometimes they want to be equal when it's convenient, but they don't want to be equal when it doesn't work to their advantage. And that irritates me. It's like, if you want to be equal, then that's what you aim for. Don't frickin' pick and choose. And I'm going to use an example and I'll word it carefully. There was a coworker and they had decided that management was giving them a difficult time because of their skin tone, which was not true. They just weren't doing their damn job. And then as we were talking about it, they said, well, if they're going to find out just how dark I can be. And I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? So on one hand, you're saying this is why they're dealing with you, but now you're going to use that as a battering ram. Do you not see the issue here?
Yeah, it does act as a dangerous reinforcement.
Do the same. Oh, I want to be, top of the food chain, independent, yada, yada, blah, 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 until it isn't convenient. And then, oh, how dare you? I'm a woman. I shouldn't have to do that. Pick your damn side. Don't just hop back and forth on the fence.
Well, the thing is, and I need to acknowledge something now before I get any further. I am fully aware of the privilege that I have. I am a white male, straight, ostensibly, living in the UK in
but aggressively single.
Yeah. Aggressively single, but I do have a level of privilege where a load of stuff I will not have experienced because I am straight white male. A friend of mine today was in an inclusivity conference. And I said, it's like, oh, right, okay. And with this coming up tonight, I asked them a couple of questions and said, so out of curiosity, was the person talking about inclusivity a straight white male in his mid-40s? And they didn't answer, which means yes.
Of course not.
But I think there's systematic issues in society now going way back. So
yep.
I'm a massive fan of, if you're good enough for the job, you should get the job. My problem is, do all groups have equal opportunity for the education beforehand? No. So there's issues there. And then there's issues on, and I think employers in the UK at least are getting better at this. Still a long way to go. We have someone coming to work for us and they were told, oh, men do this better. And like, I was sat in the interview at the time and the manager's reaction was literally in an interview, that's bullshit, was the exact words that came out of our mouth. But my issue becomes the confused narrative on expectations. And then when you then link this into books with romance, it gets even more murky, because I really don't. If you're reading something for entertainment, generally speaking, it's either to let you escape or it's for something aspirational, right? I don't understand dark romance, because the romances in a lot of those, from the female's point of view, is abusive in a lot of ways. Now, look, if you're into a bit of slap and tickle, fine. No judging here. Everyone has their proclivities. But a lot of these relationships go a lot further to stalking, breaking an entry, and dubious consent, to put it mildly. Ice Planet Barbarians comes to mind for that one straight away. But these books are really popular with these sorts of male main characters.
Yeah.
If you reverse that, there's outcry, because actually when you look, there's not a huge amount of romance aimed at straight men. Now, there's probably reasons for that. Maybe there's not maybe there's just not the market for it. Now, I don't believe that for a second. I
Mm.
don't believe there isn't a market for male romance. All you have to do is look at the amount of gay romance literature there is out there. There's a ton of it. There's loads. And it's really popular. And some of it's really well written as well. Not all of it, however.
Well, same with the other romance.
Yeah. But there's not an obvious male equivalent for straight white male for straight not straight white, straight male for straight female, right?
Yeah.
And when I think of male romance, the term that comes to my mind is trash novels. And that's, from a language point of view, is a bad term to use because trash is bad. We haven't co-opted the word to mean something else yet. We're getting there, like a lot of other words. You know, the best way to make a word not mean something bad is just to change the meaning over time. That can work both ways, unfortunately, as we are also seeing elsewhere in the world. But then, so you've got all these people reading these novels and going on about how amazing these main characters are. Okay. Doesn't work because I'm too old at this point, generally, for this to influence me realistically, because I've seen too much of the world. But a lot of the people reading these are quite young. So then you have, what are the young men seeing there then? When they, on the rare occasion, they actually talk about books.
Yeah.
Are they seeing what women are saying that they want from a male character? So the communication skills, the talking about your feelings, being in touch, being a communicator, being kind, so considerate, so on and so forth. Or do you want someone who's going to break into your house, clap you in chains, drag you to the roods, and do unspeakable things to you? Which one is that? Which now, obviously, we know which the right answer is. It's not the romance one. But somebody with very little life experience, say an 18-year-old, what's that showing? And then if they then try and portray that, they then get slapped back, as is right and proper, because consent and so on is important.
Yeah.
And so you've got a confused thing there. And the other thing is to do with, and so I don't know if anyone in the chat will know about this person. They're called Ocean Vuong. They're a poet and an author. I can't remember what I read by them. It was a curious read, but they were on an American talk show, like Late Night with Jon Stewart or something, and they were talking about language. Now, I think they're non-binary. I know they identify somewhere on the queer spectrum. I don't know where off the top of my head. But they were talking about the language we use towards children, and it was fascinating because it's something I have kids. I've never considered this. How do you say well done to children? And it actually varies. So quite often, if you're speaking to a male child, the conversation, the word choice is actually quite often violent word choice as positive reinforcement. You killed it. You smashed it. You've got a competitive level for, you battered them. And it's aggressive and it's confrontational and it's violent wording, a normalization of that violent wording, which has stuck around for years. Flip side, do I tell my daughter that she smashed it? Sometimes. She is a redhead. But it tends to be more conciliatory language. It's more communication of working together. You've done an amazing job. And that's an interesting thing as well, because we're not teaching the difference in how we communicate either. And this is leading to one of the causes for the current epidemic in male mental health, which is, I mean, mental health, first off, is horrendous right now. Interesting fact, which I didn't realize, suicide rate in the UK has been dropping since the 80s, which I didn't know. But a statistic I read earlier today, 1 in 4 people apparently have suicidal thoughts weekly. That's really high. Like, that's absurdly high. Only 1 in 17 consider self-harm, though, which is a weird break to me. In terms of, it does make me think there's some sort of drama bias, for want of a better term, in the answering. A bit like nobody will say they're a Tory in the UK anymore because it's a horrific thing to admit for a lot of people now because of embarrassment. But to accentuate the problem, because if you need help, you feel like you've got to shout now. And it all sort of conflates together into this fascinating storm, which sort of mirrors the world in general now, of everything has changed at such a rapid pace in the last 15 years. I look at my youngest and my oldest, they are worlds apart, really now. And it's fascinating.
Well, it does go fast. I just want to get to these comments, and then so Darkstar is saying, I think the opening the door, pulling the chair out isn't depicted in films anymore, so women don't expect it. I even forgot all about it until you just mentioned it. And again, it depends on the individual. That's why I think between just doing those things like the door and chairs, it's just so difficult to communicate with people because you don't know what reaction you're going to get. Hold that thought. I want to read the comments. It's a tricky line, but if there are quotas of equal opportunity that employers have to hit, then no wonder it's skewing in a certain direction. I have a story for equal, and I agree. If you're qualified, then you should have the job. Work in a male-dominated field, sell and advertise on road construction, materials to use, experience both sides of the coin, would rather talk to a man than some rather than me. Yeah, and I mean, that's the unfortunate thing, being in a field that is dominated by men. Can't think of a single male romance for the male gaze rather than the female gaze. Very true. No, wasn't in the male dominated. Oh, in terms of employment and representation and things. So years ago when I was working in residential settings, and there were security issues because of the clientele. And we had someone come in who is visually impaired. Now, this particular residence was 3 floors of house. We had alarms for a reason, and you had to do security checks. In other words, you had to physically see where everyone was and record it every hour. And of course, the checks were done randomly so that people didn't know when you were coming. And also, if anything ever happened, you had to be able to get to things quickly to ensure everybody's safety, staff and residents. This person, there was no way. How would you get up to the 3rd floor if there had been a fire or something, or back downstairs, and account for all the residents? So no, they didn't get the job. And as far as anything else, they would have been fine. But there were security and safety reasons for everybody involved that would not have been a good choice. There were other ways that they could work with that group. And this is where I get frustrated with some things, because just because you want to do something doesn't necessarily mean it's a good idea.
So it leans into a little bit, and this is, I don't think it's ever quite caught on here in the UK like it did in America, for example. The idea that you can be anything if you put your mind to it. And I understand the logic behind it. It's a very aspirational mindset. And Darkstar's right, people need to be told.
Absolutely.
And it's something that I talk about with people when they are having issues. I have a line in the sand mentality where I'll warn you once, the next time you put your foot over, I'll chop your toes off, like, so to speak. I have boundaries and I enforce them. I tell you what they are. You do not infringe on them. And
Yeah.
Nobody has a right not to be offended by anything, right? That's not how the world works. It gets a little bit things. So people misunderstand what freedom of speech means, because quite often what they talk about is freedom of expression, not freedom of speech. Because we don't have freedom of speech, to be clear. We don't. We have freedom of expression. And there's a very narrow difference, because freedom of speech is you can say whatever you want, no consequences. That's not how the world works. We have freedom of expression. People can say whatever heinous rubbish they want. You have to deal with the consequences of that,
and
which
that's
is how it should
though.
be.
There isn't consequences.
No.
And we're seeing that whether it's the media or whatever, there are no consequences. Now, the other thing, and what was it? I mean, I agree with Dark Star about the being told no more often. There was something there was an example or something there, and I can't think. Oh, wait. What were we talking just before that? Okay, so Dark Star's got a good point. Yell fire in a crowded theater without consequence. And yeah. I mean, again, oh crap.
The consequences.
It was something about a male. Oh, thank you. See, I just had to see that dipwad's face, as in Captain Makeup. So there's this big brouhaha right now about sports, which, by the way, most Canadian teams are now not going south of the border, and that's a whole other bugaboo. But see, I remember, and here's the advantage of being in my 60s. I remember when women started saying they should be allowed to play men's sports. So you had girls getting on hockey teams and this and that, and it was booyah, feminist thing, go get them, girlies. I'm thinking, why can't you just play on a girls' team? And now here we are watching Makeup and his clowns going, well, no, you can't have these other individuals in because it's not fair. And it's like, what the hell?
Well,
what the hell?
There's, I mean, there are
such a mess.
It is I mean, the thing is, there is some actual evidence from a biological point of view for some things. Fine, okay, but if you could do that, and this is why I understand why we have quotas now. I genuinely do. It is to force people it's to get rid of nepotism, basically, in a lot of ways.
Well, the problem is, though, that.
Oh yeah, it's never going to work. But the problem right now is, if you need a quota, you're doing it wrong. That's
now, what do you mean by quota?
So a lot of companies have a quota for how many of certain minorities that they take on.
Yeah.
So
same here.
If someone tells you you need to take on X amount of people of a certain sexuality, why is your recruitment so wrong? And where further back is there a systematic problem? Again, you've got the argument. So I don't like to quote him because he's an arsehole, but he made a good point. So Jordan Peterson, Canada's greatest export. No, so he's a bit of a controversial figure for good reason, but not everything he said is nonsense. And one of the things he was talking about was to do with what careers men and women go into, and it was specifically, he was asked a question about the average earnings of employees working for an airline. Perfectly fair question. And the women are on average paid less, not taking into account job role. Because generally speaking, a lot of men are pilots. They're going to make more than the hostess or the host.
Yeah.
And the argument is, it's like, well, this group tends to go for this job. This group tends to go for that job. At that point in time, he is correct. And that is why there's a disparity in the wages. The problem is that an actual thing of, well, men just prefer this and women just prefer this? Or is it a lack of opportunity being caused in the education system, which is probably both to an extent? But I would say the education system does not facilitate actual equality in any country as it is right now. Because people learn in different ways and we don't really cater in a good way for that. We cater to the lowest denominator now.
Oh, yeah, we do. And here's the problem with that in these cram-packed classrooms, and why I'm so pissed off they got rid of vocational schools here in my province, because people do learn differently. And when you cram 30 students into a room with one teacher at the front, and you have 10 of those students with individual learning plans, there is no way on earth that teacher can do that.
Nope.
And not every classroom has an educational assistant, and some educational assistants are, oh, I'm assigned to this student, and that's the only person they work with, even though they see 20 other kids who need help and support, and the kid that they're assigned to is fine. So, I mean, there's a whole boondoggle in terms of education. And now here in our province, and I mean, I've been out of schools for 10 years, miss the paycheck, miss the kids, don't miss the bullshit that's being called education now. And now there's this new thing called de-streaming, because we don't want to separate students from those being prepared for college and university and those who are going either to work or social benefits. So there's no longer two levels of classes of applied and advanced, because heaven forbid you should have those two groups separated. So now the kids who are on the fast track are bored out of their freaking minds, and the kids who are lagging behind are still going to lag behind because they can't keep up, crammed in a room with 25 other kids. I mean, and I haven't asked lately. I should actually check it out because I still know a number of people that work in the system. English classes, it was so far into the level of stupidity that they were going to do away with novel studies because they had so many kids in these classes who can't read that there was no point trying to do it.
Yep.
So that other conversation you were having about, you know, young men and what they're thinking about things in books, if they're reading them outside of school, guess what? You're not having the conversations to say, this is a book, make believe, this is not how people should behave.
Yep. Well, the other thing as well is, and this is so overlooked that it shocks me, at least here in the UK. So obviously, kids get reading books to fetch home and read with parents. The trouble is, because of the cost of living now, both parents work. This wasn't always the case. There was generally one that would stay at home. And welcome back, Margaret.
Hey, Margaret.
I want to get to Erin's comments as well in a second. But the time constraints on a modern family in some ways, the balance for the home side of it is off. And you even see it now in what's happened recently in the UK is they've extended nursery funding for early years, which is great. You can put your kid in nursery earlier, but where's the family time?
Exactly.
Because both people are at work. Now, the UK has always had this thing of, well, when kids finish school, they'll just wander off and do stuff for a few hours until people get back. That has always been a kind of a thing here, and that's fine. It teaches a little bit of independence. But two people have just worked today, 10-hour day. Real hard work, whatever it is. Both come home tired, cranky. You do still need some you time. You've got to make the meal. You've got to do this. Where is the time to read, to cook, to have your own time? And, kids are a sacrifice. I have 3.
Yeah.
I don't know how much I must have annoyed the gods at some point in my life. No, they're all amazing, bless them. But there's the homework balance is so skewed now. And the 40-hour week was based on a defunct model anyway. It was specifically designed around stationary factory work, which is easier to maintain for a period of time. That's not how the world works anymore. And then you've got the no switch off because sensory overload.
Yeah. Well, that's it. Okay. So Aaron was saying sports divide, never ending debate. Absolutely agree. Sometimes culture can take generations to shift. And I mean, even with that, so my family came from Europe to Canada. My grandfather came first. He worked for 12 years, sent money back to the family because his wife and 3 kids were there, worked his ass off, had money to buy a farm, had money to bring the family over. So when they came over, my dad went to work the next day. Now, when they came over, they brought their way of doing things. So as much as I wanted to stay on the farm, the only way I was getting that farm is if I got married, which is when I said, hell's no, and I'll be going to college now. And I did.
Yeah.
But that was the expectation. You couldn't just be female and run a farm.
No.
You had to have the man.
Which is wrong. But at one point, that was the norm. I'm thinking it does take generations. And I think we're at a really interesting tipping point now because socially, in many regards, we've accelerated away. And you've seen in some countries great strides, in others, not so much.
Yep.
But there is a real danger right now.
Backwards.
Yeah, there is a real danger right now of cultural regression going on. And the problem with that is we've just hit, in my mind, people might disagree, but this is almost like a second industrial revolution in some ways. The way that communication technology has just boomed, right? And governments will never keep up with this. It's impossible in their defense. I'll never defend government particularly much. They're a bit too ponderous. But we're at such an interesting sort of turning point in the world right now. And that's why we're seeing some of the knee-jerk reactions that we're beginning to get in political systems. And not in a good way.
Yeah.
Because, again, if kids are coming home and they don't have time to read, their reading age is not going to progress as fast.
Yeah.
And so if they're not progressing as fast, they can't move on to the higher level and the more complicated works, which then give them a better or a more diverse worldview. And also, I'm going to say something really controversial now.
Oh, goody. Am I going to lose subs?
No, but...
I probably may have from stuff I said.
I think we take the wrong approach to teaching kids literacy now. So circling back to, I was going to say Bible studies. No. Novel studies. People should study novels. I don't think they should be studying the same novels now that they did 20 years ago. If I ever found out that my kid was learning Mice and Men, I'd be up in arms. I hated it when I was at school because the thing is, the key to teaching anyone anything is to make it fun.
Yeah.
So there is not, and yes, it has some really important things in there. I will not argue that. Give them something more recent.
Yeah.
Like Shakespeare, amazing. I fucking hated it. Hated it. It's taken me 20 years to buy a book to do with Shakespeare. And it's a manga that's a reimagining.
See, I loved Shakespeare, but
like looking at how connected young people are now and how language is so different, what is the point of doing a study on Hamlet in many regards or Macbeth, where there's other more modern and equally powerful plays? in a language that is relevant and they understand. Because they're not going to engage as much. If you
I
speak
guess,
to
but I mean, Macbeth is, come on, this gruesome horror story. You got weapons, you got blood, you got all kinds of stuff. You have about
there's a
choices and conscience.
I
Hold that
did
thought
Macbeth.
while I get through the comments.
I hated Macbeth.
So, Aaron, did you just mumble?
Hated Macbeth. Hated it.
Oh, I love Macbeth.
Hated it.
That was my. I love Macbeth. I liked Hamlet. King Lear, I sort of remembered. I actually have a copy to reread, but yeah, Macbeth was my favorite.
We spent a year on Macbeth.
Oh Lord, we didn't take that long.
That's how they do it. So you have like most of the year you do Macbeth, and then we did Mice and Men side by side.
Oh Lord.
And whereas the higher group did Romeo and Juliet of all things. I wasn't in higher.
Yeah, we did that too.
But yeah,
Okay. So Aaron's saying UK inclusion, not creating equality, it's denying equality. And yeah, there were times I wouldn't feel bad for teachers just because of certain individuals and what I'd seen in rooms, but now I feel bad for all of them because it's just got to be cuckoo cuckoo. Okay, Margaret's asking about Bat Eater. I do not know this.
So I have not got it on order, but I think I might have seen it because of I just need to remind myself. Oh yeah.
Okay.
This is one where I saw the cover and I went, I want this. Yeah.
Okay, so it sounds like Ven May. Now, Margaret said it's about 3 hours on a weekday and the weekend. That's how I grew up.
Time away.
So time with.
Yeah.
Yep. And see, I grew up on a farm, so through the winter we had time, but not in the summer. Still the society expectation, women should get married, have kids, feel it keener because I'm the only female in my friend group. Family who's never been married, no kids, and happy. The happy part is the important part. Now, when I did my Keening versus Akatar video, I did make a comment, and these girls would tick me off because you knew they were just looking for a dude to have a kid to go on social benefits. And I'm like, that is not the point of a free education. Like when I went to school, and okay, part of it was my home situation. School was to get educated, get to college or university, and get a job so I didn't have to rely on somebody else. I wasn't scoping out for the dudes in the hallway. And the fact that we're in the 21st century and there are still young women doing that just blows my mind.
It's a failure of the education system.
Well, and part of it's parenting because their parents are fine with it because it's another one of those cycles.
Well, the thing
Hang on, we still got to get caught up. TikTok. We need to keep notes where millennials compared with the last generation while reacting against effects of industrial revolution, whereas we're reacting to effects of the internet revolution. So like you were saying, and you're right, it's overload. It's overwhelming some days.
The thing I saw, I mean, this was a political statement. So,
see, she liked Macbeth.
Yeah.
I'm still getting through the comments, man. Made it relevant. Save Shakespeare for drama classes. Now, okay, that's fair enough, although I didn't like theater. But yeah.
I did.
See,
no
there you go.
For anyone. But the thing is, you can still cover Shakespeare in English, right? You just don't. You do the timeline of the evolution of the language and storytelling and come to something more recent.
But see, Darkstar makes a good point too. And some of the other students in my class hated Shakespeare. I loved it. Sarcasm and satire.
Yeah.
Like there is, and again, I think you just had some crappy teachers. Well, okay, mine weren't stellar either, some of them.
I mean, you say
but
this.
It's how it's presented.
So there is that, and it has changed. The themes of Shakespeare are still relevant today, and Shakespeare is an amazing playsmith who deserves his place in history and should be remembered and studied. All that is true.
But
it's been a long time since he died. Other stuff has been made since, based on his work. So, again, if you're going to talk about...
he's in graphic novels now. Oh my gosh, we're like behind.
Oh,
yeah.
Oh, you catch up, and I'll formulate my response.
Should be seen performed. Now, see, there's it. And we went to Stratford Theatre, which I enjoyed that. Dark Star. Oh, hated Bad Eater. DNF'd it. Uh-oh. Suspect I only enjoyed Shakespeare because the teacher made it fun. Like, yeah. So agree with that. Just interviewed the author, said it's about anti-Asian hate during the pandemic in New York with an OCD MC. Interesting. See, and I was scoping out the dudes in the hallway, but ended up without one. Yes, but Margaret, I'm pretty sure you were still going for a career while you were looking at the dudes. Sarcasm, satire there. Need a good teacher to reveal it. Exactly, because of the arcane. Now, they're also in graphic novels. Don't roll your eyes at me.
I'm not rolling my eyes at you.
Smack you over in Manchester. Oh, there you go again. They're going to, you know what? I'm going to tell you the same my dad did when I did that. Your eyes are going to get stuck like that.
That's fine. It means we'll see all the other people that live near me.
That's okay. I would keep doing it and go, see, they're not stuck yet. They're not stuck yet.
If...
Write it down, Ven.
Okay. So, if you treat Shakespeare as foundational work, which a lot of people do for the English language, for good reason, because I'm not doubting on the quality of it, and I'm not doubting necessarily on the relevance of the stories. But the problem with foundational work, which Shakespeare really is for a lot of English presentation at this point, when stuff is made afterwards, it's better because it builds on the flaws or expands on the ideas and becomes, even though the points are still relevant from Shakespeare, and you can reimagine them into the modern day, which I'm perfectly fine with that. But if I was to use, and this feels like a really weird step, Neuromancer as an example. So Neuromancer is a cyberpunk sci-fi novel, and it is one of the cornerstone novels for that genre, along with If Androids Dream of Electric Sheep by Philip K. Dick. I read Neuromancer, and it's fine. It's meant to be like this cornerstone of the genre. I have read so much stuff since that piggybacks off that, and it improves on it. And I think in some ways Shakespeare is the same, even though it's, and it should still be studied, to be clear, but it doesn't need to be so in depth. There's more relevant, more modern, and more accessible modern work, especially if you then rewind to the fact that literacy age ability is decreasing, and then you're throwing Shakespeare at someone. It doesn't work. And also, from a student point of view, if I'm learning stuff, which I still try and do against my better judgment.
So there we go. So Margaret's familiar with it.
Yeah. So if you...
It was me.
I've thrown myself now. It'll come back to me. It'll come back to me in a minute.
Okay. And Dark Star's got a good point too. And again, it depends on who's doing it. But yeah, when they're redone, it gets dumbed down. And this is the part that really frustrates me, is this whole things getting dumbed down rather than uplifting students to where they can excel. And when I was in public schools and we were doing reading groups, I always picked the lowest group because they were the most fun to work with. And We'd come up with fun activities. We'd get different ways for them to excel. And they enjoyed learning. We picked things that they enjoyed doing. And if you get them excited, that learning is going to continue. But if you keep dumbing things down, they're not going to aspire to get higher. Do you know what I mean? I agree. We want people thinking about modern applications, not 17th century inheritance laws, how to get kids interested. And again, it comes down to, make it accessible, right? Instead of hefty plays. And
well, this is the other thing, right? So Darkstar disagrees, and I understand why. And there's a perfectly fair point there. Quite often we round off the edges to make it more acceptable. But on saying that, there's more modern stuff that isn't remakes that hits the same themes that is just as brutal. That hits, there's some things that Shakespeare's plays can't cover because they're unique to now. Yeah. And the other thing, and my biggest criticism of the education system in general in the UK, I can't comment on elsewhere. The education system in the UK hasn't changed, and it's aimed at two things. One is conformity. That is the aim of the UK education system. You conform. That's what the idea of the uniforms is for. You conform to societal expectations. And then when you're doing your exams, a big part of your exams is you're taught how to pass the exam, not the information. And for me, there needs to be a flip of the switch there for what we should be teaching is not in of itself necessarily the information itself, but the process of getting it. I'd teach the skills. So what we do now is we'll teach people a load of facts. That's not real. A lot of the facts are completely I've never needed Pythagoras, I don't need. I don't have any great need to know lots of things that I learned in school. I'm just like a garbage bin of useless information. What we should teach is how to do things. And then link that in with the knowledge. So this is what you're looking at. This is relevant because of this. This is how you do it. And then we then need to teach the compare and contrast, which is what I did in history. Okay, you've been told this fact. Do you know if it's true? Well, no. How do you check it? And that's what we don't teach, because what we're not doing is we're not teaching skill sets, we're teaching knowledge. And whilst knowledge is important, you need to teach a relevant skill set for when people go into the workplace. And we don't do that now because our education system here, at least, is archaic and out of date. So what I'm seeing right now, and Darkstar says finance, mortgage, taxes, practical things.
Yeah.
And I will always say, I think we should do more creative studies as well, because I think the other thing we're beginning to lack a little bit now is a level of creative thinking, because everything's on Google.
But see, and I proved with Elan.
Yeah.
Just because it's on Google doesn't mean it's accurate.
Yep.
It is not pronounced Elaine.
No.
But yet that's what AI says. And here's the other thing. And I mean, I agree, with Margaret as well. There are things that, creative thinking, critical thinking. But so here's the number of things. You need to have a foundation. If you can't read foundation number 1, you're pretty much screwed regardless of what subject you're in. Math, astronomy, whatever. You have to have reading, whether that's on your own or with assistive technology. You have to have reading. There's no way around it, even if it's to know all these damn short forms on social media. You have to have basic math. And there was actually, and this goes to Darkstar's comment, at the vocational school I was at, we had a personal management course. And that was exactly what it went through. Communication, mortgages, loans, all that type of thing of how do you set up your life and do that adulting once you're gone from school. But without that foundation, you're kind of pooched. I'm going to catch up on comments, and we're at 2:04. So
I'm fine. I'm not going to
you're
sleep
not
anytime
fine.
soon.
You're going to have to get sleep. Okay, so yes, we did. You were looking at that. So we'll come back to that one. Teaching exactly what Ven's talking about in sociology classes a few months back, okay, was a bit too meta for some of them. It's a different definition of foundation. Shakespeare's not day one. True, but the ABC should be. Indeed, every good historian taught that to analyze and compare. And that's it. Like, what worries me with a lot of young ones, and when I say young ones, I'm talking like 30s and some into their 40s. Just because you saw it on social media, TikTok, whatever, does not make it fact. Like, double check things. Foundational can mean beginning level. It can mean the star around which much of the continent's arranged, for lack of other. Yeah, and I mean, therein is the other challenge is having that communication and those discussions, because words mean so many different things, whether it's within your own, well, I'm going to say province because that's what we have, could be the states because they all each have their own. What do you have in England, Ven?
So we have
Districts?
councils.
Cities?
So we have So you have big government, so parliamentary government, and then you have your councils.
Yeah, but
And
how are you divided up?
Councils. So but it depends.
You don't have like a
it's not even that strict. So you have councils that act as local administrator for an area.
Yeah, that's like our municipal, but you don't have provinces or states or anything like that?
No, you kind of, it gets a bit complicated because we now have devolution and stuff. The closest we'd have to states would be your devolution of Wales, England, Northern Ireland, and Scotland, because the rules do vary. They're countries, but they're run closer to how states are, say, in the US, where you have variation in rules. Whereas within England, everyone has to follow. But you have city, as Jenny's put, we have city and county councils.
There we go.
Counties. Yeah. But counties is a bit of a misnomer now because you have overlap with city councils. So it gets the, I tell you, map men did.
Wait, what?
Yeah. I couldn't think of the word counties. So map men did a really interesting video on the breakdown of political hierarchy in terms of the bureaucracy in the UK. And how it runs, because it actually isn't as straightforward as you would think it is. So as an example where I am, and Manchester is a bit of an exception to this. So we have devolved powers here. Margaret knows Matt men. So we have devolved powers here. So I am under Salford City Council where I live. But Salford City Council is also partially under Manchester City Council. But doesn't make but Salford City Council runs most of the stuff. But then you also have the Mayor of Manchester, who has devolved power. So he has extra powers. But we also have a Mayor of Salford, but they're ceremonial and don't really have any powers. So it gets, depending on where you are, it gets really, really confusing and convoluted on who is responsible for what.
So. So in Scotland, they have shires, with the exception of Fife, which is still called Kingdom.
Oh, that's the most Scottish thing I've ever heard. But yeah, so you do have, so like technically where I live, it used to be under Lancashire, but now it's not. Now it's under Greater Manchester, and more specifically Salford, because they changed all the postcodes when I was a kid. So when I was a kid, we were M30, we're now M44, because they changed the boundaries and the way the councils operated. So it gets confusing. Yeah, Yorkshire's going to be quite similar as well, because I believe
cities, counties, and still the ridings. Yeah. So it's
and on top of that as well, I believe Yorkshire also has a mayor now. So an actual proper devolved mayor. So
and here in London, we have our municipal government, which is like your council, and we have a mayor and the others. But we're also in the township of Middlesex, in the province of Ontario. So there's all, yeah. I mean, it can get quite complex and stuff for sure. And
yeah, I mean, generally speaking, most things like everyday running goes to whatever your local council is. So for me, it's Salford, but I can access stuff from other Greater Manchester councils. So like the library, so I can use Manchester Central Library, which is great.
Right.
So the sewers are run by United Utilities where I am, which is a private company because the fucking stupid government sold the utilities to private companies and did limited oversight.
And you're such See, you're reading ahead, and this is why I get behind you, Stanker.
Sorry.
George Stewart.
I get very annoyed at the excuse you, Darkstar.
And yeah, privatization schemes. And I mean, they're a problem here as well, and pretty much everywhere they are. Lancastrians are in the sewers.
Just saying, the Reds won the war. It might have been many centuries ago, and eventually they all died, and you put a Scots person on the throne that was related to Yorkshire. But
dwarves that have Scottish accents. Ours are run at county level, I think. Probably varies. So
yeah, it's a mess. But yeah, we have a major issue right now is that we're preparing kids for a world that doesn't exist anymore.
Well, and that's it. And I know here they looked at different things. And like I say, I've been gone for years. When I was leaving, they were all into this project-based learning. I don't know if it's still a thing or not. But instead of individuals learning their own thing, what they were starting to do in some high schools is they would combine 3 subjects. So, say English, geography, and math. And they would come up with different assignments that would hit all the points for those subjects, but they were learning it as a group. There was no individual sit at a desk and do your own thing. You were put into groups. Excellent in theory if everyone's learning at the same basis, your groups all everyone in your group shows up, and you're not bullying other kids.
I was going to say power dynamic is such a massive thing, and also supervision. Yep. Jesus.
So you need to sleep soon.
No,
we're going to be off by 2:30 at 2:30.
2:30. Well, hey.
2:30. 2 hours at 30. So for me, it'll be 5:30. For you, it's much later.
Only 10:30. It's fine. No, it's
from the side, yeah. But you need the foundational understanding of each subject first. Yes.
Thing is, you need to land basic English and basic math. So you need to make sure that's landed. What does that look like? And from an English point of view, it comes entirely through reading and making reading interesting. So you need to focus on the stories first. And actually, you can teach how to read a factual text by teaching how to break down at quite a young age a story.
But that's it. You need, and I mean, you brought up a valid point too with parents, because it's not just parents who aren't doing it and expecting the schools. It's some parents don't have the time.
No.
And when you have young ones, I mean, that's really the time to start sitting and reading with them and making it fun, whether it's coloring in pictures of the alphabet or whatever. There were, for kids who are tactile, You get the letters that you can feel and
Yeah.
trace instead of just the writing. There are so many different things, but it has to start early. You
Yeah.
can't just wait till they get into preschool or school. And it boggles my mind, but I mean, again, it's part of the way the world works now. In my day, there was nothing called daycare or preschool or any of that stuff. You had kindergarten, and at 5 years old, in my case, 4.5, because my birthday is in January, you went to school for a whole day, not a half day, a whole day.
So in the UK, you can start nursery at 1.
What?
Yep, this is what's recently come in. They give funding for nursery at 1, and then they do 16 hours potentially funding. No, I think everyone gets 16 hours funding now for nursery up until the age of 4. And then at 4, you go into reception, which is a full day. Like they go straight into a full day. So they have like 4 hours for the nursery period, and then you start school, and there might be 10 minutes difference, but
Yeah.
it's basically 9 till 3:30 or 8:30 till 3, something like that. And
Wow.
Dark Star says it's based on one parent works and one stays at home.
Yeah.
And unfortunately,
Which doesn't happen.
it doesn't happen because everything's so
Well, not
expensive.
for many. Well,
Yeah.
and that's it. And if you're a single parent, you're screwed.
Yeah.
And absolutely. And I mean, here, some parents don't have the skills themselves. And
Yeah.
there's the other challenge. And that's why I say it's not deadbeat parents. There are some I know they couldn't read. So how on earth are they going to help their kids learn to read? And
It's not just
there's
that
just
though.
so many issues.
Some people, and I class myself amongst this as well, I can't teach.
Mm,
I know I can't. I don't have the patience. I'm aware of this. What I can do is coach if someone has the base, because
yeah,
I'm a trainer at work.
yeah.
But I need someone to have that base level first, and then I can pull it forward. Early years, it for me trying to help my youngest who
Mm,
has some challenges is incredibly frustrating. And actually, I probably would do and have done more damage than good trying
mm.
to help. Whereas for my middle one, who is probably the brightest of the three, also female, double standards.
Yeah, we
but
got around to it through the discussion somewhere.
but she'll come to me with problems and she struggles with maths quite a bit. And I can sort of pull her through and show her different ways of doing it and figure out a way to help her because she has the base level. And
Yeah,
it's just a matter of turning the thing so it fits in the right way. And
yeah.
that I can do. During the pandemic, I have never wanted to throttle my kids so much in my life because it felt like they were being deliberately stupid and they weren't.
Yeah.
I'm just not, as a person, capable of doing that. It's not what I can do, and that's the other thing. A lot, and parents should do a lot, but some things should be for the school, and the schools are on demand and can't do it. And
Mm.
again, they're getting people ready for a world that disappeared 50 years ago.
Well, and like Dark Star said too, it's set up with the thought of one person's at home and one person's working, and that is far and few between anymore.
Yeah.
Now, you know, and this is what drives me nuts with that one little puppet south of the border, because some parents don't have a choice. They have their kids. They don't all get maternity leave, which we have up here in Canada, or paternity leave, but there's, different things, and it depends on what kind of a job you have, whether you can access it and still pay the bills and things. But the putz who's telling the makeup clowns lies, their press secretary, 26 years old, had a kid, and then 3 days later, she's back at work. I'm sorry, WTF? You didn't have to go back at work. Who is then raising your kid? And you didn't have to go back to that position. You decided to have a kid out of wedlock.
Yeah.
You got married afterwards before you started taking care of the big diaper baby and his kid. But, like, to me, the biggest thing parents are supposed to do is teach your kids some morals, ethics, and how to treat humans like humans. It irks me when people get divided by nationality or where they were born or any of that other stuff, because at the end of the day, human is human is human.
There is a quote, it's a Pratchett quote, and I can't remember which book it's from, and I'm going to paraphrase it.
Margaret's ears perked up.
Injustice starts when people start treating other people as things.
Exactly.
Dehumanization.
That's the big thing about it, is when you dehumanize, that's when really gnarly things start happening. And that's what a certain individual is trying for.
Not just him.
Well, no, and that's it, right? The world has seen this before. This is not new. This is what happens when people forget history, when people are not taught history.
Yep.
And I can't remember who said it, but when you forget history, you're bound to repeat it.
Yeah. Well, history is very cyclical. I know we've spoken about this before, but you can almost time it to the year when it flips back around again. Yeah.
And that's it. And I see these ads. So you're absolutely right, Dark Star. And I've seen these ads for kids, writing on their iPad and things. And okay, they're getting the hand motion, because I am a big fan of Jeanette Farmer and handwriting versus typing. It's two different skill sets, and it impacts your brain differently. And I actually got into this debate with a friend who also is an EA, and they had taken handwriting out of the school here for years. And I'm like, that's ridiculous. You need to be able to write. And she's like, no, you don't. They all have phones. They all have this and that. And I'm like, no, they don't. And even if they do, what do they do when the power goes out?
That is the point we will get to, though. Because, okay, let me turn that a little bit then.
Oh, here you go. First, Margaret has a question.
How long's
the cycle?
Not exactly, but between 100 and 150 years. A couple of generations. All it takes. Okay, so it's going to extend a little bit over time, actually, because lifespans get longer. This generation lives it. This generation lives with the aftermath. Aftermath again. By the time that fourth generation comes along, this one's dead. Nobody's alive that's seen it. And it's forgotten, because it's all well and, it's all well and good reading something in a book or being told about something. But if someone doesn't have the lived experience, you can't sell the horrors of things that have happened in the past unless you talk to people that have been through it, right? And I think 4 generations. So I think we're about to go through one now. I think it's quite a short cycle this time around, actually. Normally I'd say it'd be longer, but it feels like, and it might change because of the way information is spread out now. Because, as David Mitchell said, we live in a world where we can find out anything, but truth may never truly be discerned. We have, and he said, a new flat earth society, a new one who's looked at the facts and gone, the world's flat. No, but they've found evidence that it is.
See, and Aaron's got exams still rely on reading and writing, but do all jobs require writing? Now, writing, and see, I used to talk to my students, about this. Now, Margaret's saying, I don't know, but life does. I used to talk to my students about this. This was when I was in a vocational school. So I'd say 95% of our school population were all on individual education plans. Classes were smaller, and it was job training and academics. But yeah, you have to be able, no matter what job you're doing, there's some reading involved. The writing, okay, it might be typing or different things, but reading, absolutely. And I remember one of my clients when I worked with young offenders, and Zach was amazing. He was 18 years old. He made these little tiny miniature houses that were just incredible, but he'd never learned to read. And he'd gotten a job with a roofer, and unfortunately, because he couldn't read, when the roofer sent him to go get a particular pack, quit reading ahead, particular pack of
I'm not commenting, I'm
tiles, Zach ended up opening all the packets to find the right color. The problem is, once the packets opened, the employer couldn't take them back for a refund, even if he didn't need all of them for the job. Needless to say, Zach didn't stay employed long.
No, I mean...
So, even if you just know your color words, seriously, against those banks, schools, and representatives.
So it depends what you mean by writing. So if you mean to be able to communicate your thoughts or record stuff in a physical form, yes. Does everyone need to be able to write with a pen? I think we're approaching the point where we don't anymore. Just like most people now don't know how to inscribe a clay tablet. We're moving past it. It's almost becoming a redundant skill. Do I think that's a good thing? No, I think we should still do it for one reason or other, because I don't trust digital copies of anything particularly.
It's how the information gets to your brain. Jeanette Farmer's work proved that. She's helped people with
a repetition
and
thing.
other things.
Yeah, there is a repetition aspect
neural
to
pathways in your brain.
Yeah, but on the flip side, you can still do the repetition with one of the thingy pens. There's different ways of repetition. So I think we're at a point where we are going to evolve out of pen and ink, and it'll become a bespoke skill, like a lot of skills that become redundant have. I still think the skill to transcribe, that's probably a better term, the skill to transcribe things is an important one. I just think that, like many things, it's changing as technology changes.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so Dark Star, I could go off on a tangent. People need to realize facts and not beliefs, they are fact. It's a fact the earth is round. I was told due to the internet, we take in information in a day more in a day than generations took in their lifetimes. I could believe that.
And how much of it is not accurate?
And how much of it sticks, right? I mean, think of all the different videos you've seen, whether they're BookTube or whatever, and how much of them do you actually remember? So there's a lot of information coming in. One thing I do want to correct you on, though, Ven, you were saying the time period and people dying at 45. No, they did not.
No, they didn't die at 45 then. It was a made-up time frame. But
because my family, they were definitely much older. And I mean, here's the other scary thing. I think I was 18 or 19 before the first person I knew died of cancer. And there'd been a lot of funerals up to that point. And now I can even tell you how many people I know that have passed of cancer. Like, it's just wild. And I know people say, oh, they didn't know it before and it's just diagnosed different now. But yeah, I don't know. There's so many things changing.
I think both of those facts can potentially be true. I think
Combination.
we do know more now, but I think there is lifestyle choices that do not help.
Yeah. So Margaret saying no patience for flat earthers, not sure what to do with them. Patience at Ven's level with the teaching. See, I was good with that, but there's some things I have no patience for.
Ask them to find the edge and jump. That's what you do with them.
They're talking about turtles and where the turtle's located. Tablets still discovering ancient history. Our present history is all online, can be lost at the touch of a button. Now here's the other thing with not Easter Island. It's one of the books I was just looking at a while ago, but the Sumerian tablets.
Yes.
There are hundreds and hundreds of them sitting in museums collecting dust, yet to be deciphered.
Yep.
You know, they still don't have it. And yeah, our history online is creepy. Calligraphy, yes, it's a beautiful skill that is sad to lose. Yeah, it's incredible. Jenny complying in advance. Still got my pen from 7th grade. Whoa, I don't have that, but sacred memories indeed. Mostly use it for Xmas cards. Nice.
I don't do Christmas cards.
I don't either, but that's a tree environmental thing.
Not a great surprise to anyone. I write in how would you describe my handwriting?
Interesting.
Yeah.
See, I'm like Darkstar, cursive.
I don't write for other people, which was a really, really massive problem when I was note taking for other people the other day, because I wrote in my normal shorthand interview notes. So that was fun for whoever had to read. It's like you don't actually have to be able to read this, do you?
But I'm not sure who this is for, but I don't do Christmas cards.
Also,
I do email and voicemail, but not cards.
So, just a quick side. Jenny's comment about turtles was a Discworld reference,
yes,
as well potentially as a religious one as well. But right, so the thing with losing everything online,
you got 3 minutes, dude, and then we're going because I got to eat dinner and you got to go to sleep.
So the thing with losing everything online, which is a very real possibility, but there's ways of mitigating that. But is it any difference it being lost online to being like the clay tablets that we've never got around to,
or burnt in a library like Alexandria?
Yeah, there's always a disaster point.
Yeah.
And it's about building in the fail safes so you don't have one data center and you keep them isolated from each other. Which, and that's again something that people don't look at. There needs to be fail safes and contingencies.
Well, and that's it. You don't have just one library with everything collected. No. So, Jenny, I write a mix of cursive and non in the same sentence. And it depends. And then Margaret does as well. Yeah. Usually once I've started cursive, I keep going with it. Like I say, I had a lot of practice in public school. But I was actually going to do a video. Bye, Margaret. Thanks for joining. I was going to do a video, and on my thumbnail was just going to be a sheet of paper that said, "Can you read this?" and see if even that got people to because not everyone would be able to. My students would go wild when I would have something written and they're like, I can't read that.
I mean, nearly no one can read my handwriting, so it's great.
No, but mine was legible cursive, and they didn't know what cursive writing was. They rarely saw it.
No. But
well, on that note,
yeah.
Okay, so we didn't make our 2 hours, but no surprise there.
I did tell you we wouldn't be only 2 hours.
I know, but I was going to try and keep to it because you need to get sleep before work.
4
We
hours is
did
fine.
cover part of, well, we did talk about tropes and we did talk about double standards, and we didn't get all too crazy.
No, I was relatively good today. Drunken spider handwriting is what I've got that's run through an ink pot. That's what I was told in school.
Mom used to joke, sister has the handwriting of a doctor.
Mine's a doctor on vodka or something. It's horrendous. I can't read it, and it's designed for me. But
We'll see. And like I say, if not for all those lines, mine wouldn't be so immaculate. So beating up those guys was worth it because I've gotten all kinds of compliments through my life. Anywho, thank you so much to everyone who's been able to join us. Thank you so much to Ven and joining me for the conversation. We got some interesting points. We got,
we did. We'll need to hit character
neither of
archetypes
us swore at each other, so it was all good.
We'll need to properly touch on character archetypes at some point. But I might. It's like what archetypes favor the fool?
Oh God, I don't know. Skank.
I mean,
I'll have to brush up on archetypes and read my 3 books to figure it out.
I base all mine on my D&D characters, which are normally murder hobos. So
there you go, Jenny, femme fatale.
Yeah.
See?
No,
Darkstar
she's
agrees
not.
with me.
She's too passive.
She's a skank.
She's a. Honestly.
And on that note, we're saying goodbye.